We encourage curiosity, communication, and exploration in children, and see those same tenets reflected in both children's literature and a cosmopolitan perspective. In examining Max's journey in Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, we see Max grow in his perception and understanding of others, as well as his perception and understanding of himself, while still appreciating where he's been and where he's yet to go, just as we see Appia and Hansen advocate for in their own works. Where the Wild Things straddles the line between fun and frightening, whimsical and grotesque, safe and dangerous. When Max's room turns into a jungle, we're spooked and intrigued. When Max sails across the ocean for days and encounters the wild things, we're nervous and exhilarated. And when Max realizes he's lonely and returns home, we're sad and relieved. We see this same juxtaposition in a cosmopolitan perspective. It's the classic individual versus society theme that we see in both Appia and Hansen's definition of cosmopolitanism. Max, just like any other citizen of the world, is struggling to find his way. When he journeys to the land of the wild things to confront and come to terms with his difficult emotions, he's doing it for all of us. And when he is calmed down, he shows us that it's okay to be humble, come home, and depend on someone else for a little while. In Sendak's work, the perspective is turned on its head, asking not how children can be adults, but what's the inner life and worldview of a child? In his words and images, Sendak answered that question boldly. The world is a scary and often overwhelming place. All the more reason to develop cosmopolitanism. As Max's journey opens, we meet him. He's a young boy armed with a very large hammer. He's wearing his wolf suit and making mischief about the house. This includes chasing the dog about with a fork. His mother, never seen in the story, is unsympathetic and shouts at Max that he is a wild thing. Max responds by shouting back, "I'll eat you up." Because of this, he is sent to bed without eating anything. Both Max and his mother lack the ability to communicate effectively because they do not yet understand one another. In his bedroom, Max's rage continues, but soon trees begin to grow from the floor and the walls begin to disappear. His room becomes one with the surrounding forest. Max walks through the forest, coming soon upon a private boat that he takes across the ocean to where the wild things are. In Hansen's work, we see Max began to gain a receptivity to the new and a loyalty to the known. Once Max lands his boat, wild things appear from the jungle, bearing sharp, pointed teeth and menacing claws. Max's wild things are threatening too, but he confronts them and dominates them and becomes their king, commanding them to commence a wild romp in which he joins them. What we see is that we can create not just ways to tolerate differences, but also ways to learn from one another, receptive to the new and loyalty to the known. And we also see that further developed in Hansen's work. As Max's relationship with the wild things continues, we see the tenets of Appia's work build and build. First, we see from Appia the recognition of Max's responsibility for all human beings, and also the recognition that human beings are different and that we can learn from one another's differences. Of course, here, those human beings are the wild things. Additionally, from Hansen's work, we see Max use familiar frames of interpretation and understanding, juxtaposed with alternative frames that shed new light on the questions, problems, and issues at hand. Max takes what he knows from his old life, his home with his mother, and puts it into place with how the wild things live on their island. Of course, Max here commands them to stop the wild rumpus and sends them off to bed without any supper, a pattern we see repeated in Max's own life with his mother, and begins to feel lonely, wanting to be with someone where someone loves him best of all. He smells good things to eat from far away across the world and journeys home, leaving the wild things. In turn, Max is developing a global perspective, but also acknowledging the power of the old juxtaposed with the new. Of course, what we see at the very end is that Max returns home and he now possesses cultural hybridity. And we also see that he's satisfied once again with his own place and time.